All right, so one thing you'll notice is there's only one exam on this, and that's the final exam, the last day. And so I have two different exam schemes that I do. I do regular midterm exams, or I do chapter tests. And so this semester I'd like to do chapter tests. So after we finish a particular chapter, then we'll have a test on that chapter, maybe a week afterwards. And so if you look at the syllabus, we're going to cover chemical reactions initially, and then coordination compounds. And so we'll be tested on some aspects of chemical reactions and coordination compounds next week. And then we're going to go to chapter 15. We'll cover that next week, and we'll be tested on that the following week. Okay, that's how it's going to work. I'll collect the homework. The homework is going to be paper homework, and the homework assignment I posted on something called Piazza, which I'll show in a minute after the break. And so the homework for that particular chapter will be due on the day of the test. The day of the test, though, it's either going to be on a Tuesday or Thursday. I'll announce it, beforehand, which day it will be. And the test is just going to be 2 pages. It's more like a kind of a quiz, I think. 2 pages worth anywhere from 30 up to 65, 70 points. All right. Uh-huh. Normally for those, I'll let you know if you need to bring in the Scantron. It would be, the question was, do you need a Scantron? There are going to be multiple choice questions. Depending on how many multiple choice questions I put on, I might ask you to bring a Scantron, or I might just ask you to mark it on the test, rather than run a Scantron. And so typically the way the exam is going to be set up is 1 page of multiple choice, maybe the other page calculations and conceptual stuff. Okay. Is that clear, what's happening with the exams? And so you can expect like a quiz or exam after every chapter. Some of the chapters are a little longer. I spend more time. For example, chapter 17, chapter 18, those are longer. So the test is a little longer, so I make them worth more points. I'm only covering the first 3 sections of chapter 24 this week, and so that is really going to be a short quiz.
How far ahead will you let us know when the exams?
Well, I'll let you know when basically, you can kind of figure it out, because when we finish the chapter, then you'll have a week. So let's say we finish the chapter, then you'll have at least a week to finish the homework and review the material. You can tell this is going to be a problem at the end of the semester, because I'm not going to have you come in the week after the final to complete the exam for that particular chapter. And so if you look at the end of the semester here, we have chapter 25. Well, the chapter 25 material will be placed on the final exam, and it won't be like a full test. That is half chapter 25, half the rest of the material. It'd be more like a slight bias towards 25 amongst all the other chapters. Okay. Any other questions about the tests? Uh-huh.
So a good example of the quizzes would be the practice test that you had last semester, where they were divided up into chapters and stuff.
All right. The practice tests, what Matthew is talking about, those are past exams that I've given. And so I have the same thing for Chem 1B. I have my old tests from the last time I taught this class. So I'll post those on Piazza, so you could use those for practice, which is fine. It'll be that. And so you can see what the format is before the test comes. Okay, anything else? The homework is going to be paper homework, and what I'm looking for the homework is just, did you attempt every problem? Because the way I grade the homework is I'll just check it off. You know, did you try the problem, give it a serious attempt? If you did, I'll give you full credit for that particular problem. And so let's say there are 10 problems in a homework set, then each problem is going to be worth 1 point. Okay, each chapter is worth 10 points. So if there are 20 problems in that homework set, then it's a half a point each. And so you can see, well, if you didn't even attempt this problem, you're going to lose a half a point. You know? If there are 40 questions, I don't think there are any chapters I give 40 questions on. You know, it's between 20 and 30 or so questions per chapter. And so less than a half a point per question. Okay. Let's say, well, since we're talking about the homework, let's say you're stumped on a particular homework problem. What you want to do in that case is, you know, they say you shouldn't open the solutions guide, right? You should really gut it out, try to figure out, you know, the answer to that particular problem. But if I give you, let's say, 20, 30 plus homework problems, then you're going to quickly find you're going to run out of time. There just isn't enough time to really struggle through a whole bunch of problems. And so this is more of the shotgun approach to homework. You know, a lot of problems. In this shotgun approach, then, what I recommend is if you do get stuck, you know, I wouldn't waste too much time. I've talked to people, and the reason I say this is I've talked to people who've spent 1 hour on one problem. You know, 1 hour on one problem, it's great, you know, you're putting in the effort, but I know most of you are really hard pressed for time. And so what I recommend is go ahead and crack the solutions guide. You know, if it's not coming, then open the solutions guide and read the answer and then copy it down. You know, I don't mind if you copy the answer from the solutions guide into the homework, because then, you know, you're registering it, you know, how it was solved. That way you can use that information for, you know, similar problems or even more complicated problems, you know, because my philosophy on the homework, which is different than some of the other professors here, but my philosophy on the homework is, you know, this is just my thinking about how the brain works and that kind of stuff, you know. For me, the way I figure is, you know, you have all these neurons and other things, and you got to make the connections, right? But how do you make the connections to integrate all that knowledge? Right? Do you do that by looking at one specific problem and then, you know, figuring that out? You know, that's great, but then you're missing, you know. In other words, you're looking at one tree. You know, you have a whole forest you need to study. But if you spend all your time on one tree in the forest and neglect all the other trees, you know, how much of the forest are you going to really understand? You know, you don't know the extent one way or the other. You just know that one tree, and you know it very well because you spent hours on that one particular tree studying it, right? And so my philosophy, at least for a beginning class, like, general chem is for beginning class in chemistry, is you want to get a more broader overview of the forest. You want to see the range, and the way you do this is you don't just work 5 homework problems. You know, you work as many homework problems as you can, and you know, I've tried lots of different things as a student, and you know, this came to me, this wasn't any original idea of my own, but this came to me by looking at, you know, when I transferred to UCLA, you know, it was a bit of a struggle. When you transfer to UCLA, you go through this thing called orientation. At orientation, they tell you, oh, your GPA is going to drop 1. Guaranteed. It happens to everybody, right? Your GPA will drop 1. And then I thought, okay, I better prepare. So I went in there and I studied. I studied hard and I tried to get good grades, right? But, you know, I was struggling initially. And then I was looking at, oops, sorry, I forgot to turn this on. I was looking at some of the other people who were doing very well in the class, you know? And then I was thinking, man, are they just are they just like chemistry geniuses? You know, and there's no way I can ever achieve that level? Or, actually, yeah. You got the, this is a reserve. Or, yeah, sorry, Ann. But anyway, going back to the story, you know, I was trying to figure out what is the difference. You know, because I thought I was studying the maximum amount of time I had. I was new there, so I wanted to do well. So I spent all my free time studying. I didn't have any more time left over for anything else except studying. And yet, you know, I wasn't doing nearly as well as these other people in the class. And so then I started talking to them because I sat next to them. It's a small class. And started figuring out, you know, what made them special and why was I having such a big struggle. And so then I kind of figured it out. I figured it, you know, it was certain ways that they were studying. They were studying differently than the way I was studying. For example, I was the person who was spending an hour on one homework problem, right, trying to figure that particular homework problem out. This person instead was doing all the homework problems in the entire chapter, every single one of them, even the ones the instructor didn't assign. You know, I was doing just the ones that were assigned and not even completing those. Right? And then I asked, how can you do all the homework problems? No, it's impossible. There's not enough time to do them. Well, at UCLA, they give the complete solutions guide. And so every single homework problem has the answer. And then I thought, oh yeah, you know, I only did the odds or that. And so this changed my way of doing homework now. You know, I think homework is extremely important, and it always surprises me that people don't do it. You know, I can't understand why people don't do the homework. You know, and this is an analogy I've probably told many times before, but it's like, let's say I'm trying to learn the piano, but you know, I'm just going to watch somebody play the piano, and then I'm going to go and give a piano performance. Is that going to work? Yeah, obviously everybody's going to think, no, it's impossible to learn the piano just by watching. You have to do it, right? Well, the same thing. It's impossible for me to learn chemistry without doing it. And the more you practice, the better you're going to get. And so, to make a long story short, it turned out it was the way they were studying, and it was the preparation. You know, I started comparing, okay, what was your Chem 1A, 1B like compared to my Chem 1A, 1B? And there was a huge difference, you know, in expectation. Their Chem 1A, 1B was much more rigorous than what I had. I had, you know, at Santa Barbara City College, it's pretty mellow there. And here it's much more intense, you know. So I taught at Santa Barbara City College too, Chem 1A and 1B there. And it was a lot less demanding than here. But I think it's a lot less demanding to the detriment of the student, because in the next step up, they're going to have a much bigger jump, a much higher, you know, hurdle than somebody from here. It'll be an easier transition. If you look at the general chem book that they use at UCLA, they use an honors level book for everybody. You know, and so we have close to an honors level book here, so the transition is rough. Whereas at Santa Barbara City, they were using a lower level textbook. It just didn't go in as much depth. And so this book, we aren't going to cover everything in great depth, you know, but it's always there as a reference if you need it. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up buying the UCLA General Chem book and start reviewing, so that then I could be at the same level they were, basically. And then, you know, the difference started to shrink, the gap, you know, between them. And so those are some of the things. There are other things that I learned. I'll talk more about those as we go on. But anyway, that's the homework. So give the homework a shot. You have the solutions guide available, the complete one. You know, so your homework, you know, there are different philosophies about this, but the homework should be an easy A. You know, I can't understand why it wouldn't be an easy A. And in fact, you probably could get an A plus, like 100%, without too much trouble, just by copying it. It's not asking too much, but a lot of people say, oh, that copying is worthless. No, it's not worthless. At least you've seen it and you're writing it, it's registering, and so hopefully your mind, your subconscious is working to connect the neurons, and then it clicks, right? How it works. All right, let's see, what else do I need to talk about? All right, if you look at this course information sheet here, and we'll flip to the second page. The exams and the quizzes in this class are going to total 500 points, about half the percentage if I stay on schedule. These points might be adjusted as we go on, and so these aren't set in stone here. But anyway, 500 points for the midterm exam/quizzes. Your paper homework's worth a total of 100 points. This is about 10 points per chapter, plus a chemical reactions handout I give. The lab is 200 points total. Typically, there are 15 points per experiment, except qualitative analysis, which is abbreviated QUAL. The reason qualitative analysis is worth more than twice, is because it's a very long lab. I think we do 5 or 6 days of qualitative analysis. I'll talk more about what qualitative analysis is when we get there. And so long lab, and you're running unknowns. I think a lot of you have done qualitative analysis in Intro Chem, Chem 4. Same type of stuff. Then we have a synthesis lab, which is worth 30 points, a titration lab, which is worth 30 points, and a rate law lab, which is worth 30 points. And typically in my Chem 1B, I have the reports. I mean, these are just your normal labs. But what I have you do is I have you write a formal scientific report for these 3 labs, which we'll talk about. And so that'll give you more practice. The reason I was thinking for three, in general chemistry at UCLA, every report is a formal scientific report. They got to write an abstract, an introduction, etc. for every single one. And so, if you get a little more practice, and these get easier as you do more of these. So the first one's always tough. The final exam's worth about 20%, 200 points, comprehensive. The grade is just going to be based on what your point total is. The cutoff for an A is going to be 88%. That's not going to change this semester. 88%'s been consistent. Set. So you'll need 88. 78 for B, 65 for C, 50 for D. The lab, if you're not aware, El Camino has a policy that if you fail lab, you fail the course. So I had people in the past show up just for lecture and skip the labs, and I had to fail them, even though they were getting A's on the test, which was a surprise. All right, note about academic honesty. If you have any special needs, we have a special resource center. You can talk to me or leave a note for me on the questionnaire. Changes, usually I announce any kind of changes in lecture or on Piazza, or usually on Piazza. Okay, flip to the first page, and we have a catalog course description. Let me give you a little overview of the course. Coordination compounds, the reason we're jumping to chapter 24 first is this is a new type of compound. You probably haven't encountered many of these, but we'll see these repeatedly through the semester, so we have to jump there and learn how to name these, and also know a little bit about the structure and the properties of those. Then chapters 15, 16, 17, and 18 all deal with the same basic type of calculation. These are chemical equilibrium calculations. You guys have done stoichiometry. You have a limiting reagent, excess reagent. calculate, theoretical yield, percent yield, that type of stuff. Well, what happens if you don't have 100% reaction? What happens if you only have partial reaction? Let's say only 20% of it reacts. Then you have to adjust your stoichiometry because not all of it reacted, right? Well, it turns out a little bit more complicated than that because, the percent reaction depends on your initial concentration. Sometimes if your initial concentrations are high, the percent reaction might be lower or even higher, etc. So we're going to be talking about these. These are called equilibrium style calculations, and it's just a more complicated stoichiometry to account for it. For example, if you look at acetic acid is a weak acid. Weak acids are weak electrolytes. Weak electrolytes partially what? Partially react, right, with water. We call reaction with water what? Hydrolysis. They partially hydrolyze in water or partially ionize, you could say. And so how do we handle that? Do you do that as a stoichiometry type calculation? What do you do in these partial reactions? So we'll talk about that throughout these chapters. So 16 through 18. And then we're going to talk about kinetics, chapter 14. So, we skipped 14, but I do 14 later. There are a lot of calculations involved there. I like to do 14 later because I like to combine chapter 14 with chapter 19, kinetics and thermodynamics. Kinetics are like the speed of the reaction, thermodynamics, like the energetics of the reaction. And so I like to talk about those because they're a lot of related. They're two different things, but there are a lot of things that connect them. And then let's see. We go from chapter 19, which is thermodynamics part 2, to chapter 20, electrochemistry, which deals with what types of reaction. Electrochem, What do you guess? Light. We'll talk more about electrochem, but redox reactions, oxidation reduction reactions. And then to chapter 24, we'll finish that, the remaining parts, and then to chapter 25. Chapter 25 deals with nuclear chemistry. All right, the prereq for the course is Chem 1A or equivalent. The required materials, you're going to have Petrucci, Petrucci Part 2, if you bought the soft-bound one. You'll need the lab manual. Lab manual is a little bit more pricey than the Chem 1A lab manual. This is a custom published book, Catalyst. You'll need a composition notebook, quad-ruled with the sewn binding, just one of those. Does somebody have one of those? Yeah, just like this. How much was that, Arthur? A couple bucks? Yeah, okay. If you can't find one with quad-ruled, then college-ruled is okay for the composition notebook. Quad-ruled is the graph paper inside there. College-ruled would just be the lines. Safety goggles from Chem 1A should be fine. Scientific calculator. What is really useful in Chem 1B is a scientific calculator that does the quadratic equation. It has a quadratic equation or equation solver. You're not supposed to have a programmable calculator in Chem 1B, but you can buy one of these SAT approved ones that will do quadratics.
What type is that?
I have the FX115ES. FX115ES, which is, I can't remember if it's a Sharp or Casio or something like that. I forgot the manufacturer. But the number I remember, FX115ES or equivalent. Available at Target for, I bought my last one at Target. I bought 3 of them so far. One at CVS was like 16, 17 bucks, and then the Target had a pretty good price on it. And so I got it there. That one's really nice to have, and you can solve the quadratics rapidly. Sharpie pens are nice to have. Lab coat or apron. They're requiring these at UCLA now. Lab coats and disposable gloves. All right, any questions on this? All right, let's take a break and then we'll talk more about